The room froze. Jim Jordan leaned forward, his shoulders squared like a prize fighter stepping into the ring, eyes burning with that familiar mix of intensity and impatience. Under the glaring studio lights, his reputation preceded him. Relentless, unyielding, a man who thrived on overpowering opponents with volume and pressure. He had come to this debate prepared to strike, and in his mind, Jasmine Crockett was the perfect target. The cameras panned across the set. Viewers at home could feel the tension through their screens, the polished desk gleaming under the spotlight, the restless shuffle of papers, the faint hum of microphones. In the studio audience, whispers rippled like an undercurrent. Everyone knew Jordan's playbook: interrupt, intimidate, overwhelm, and everyone expected the same performance tonight. Crockett sat still, her expression unreadable. She didn't fidget, didn't blink too quickly, didn't let the electricity of the moment rattle her composure. Her stillness itself was a weapon, a sharp contrast to Jordan's tightly wound energy. It was the calm before a storm, though nobody yet realized which direction the thunder would break. Jordan cleared his throat, leaned into his microphone, and launched his first strike. His words came rapid fire, questions packed with insinuations, statements disguised as inquiries. The rhythm was familiar. Talk fast enough, force the opponent into a corner, never give them time to breathe. He thought he was setting the trap, tightening the ropes around her before she had even spoken. The audience leaned forward. This was the Jim Jordan they knew, direct, confrontational, confident. The man who had made careers out of bulldozing his way through hearings was about to prove his dominance once again. Or so it seemed, because as Jordan pushed harder, raising his voice with each sentence, Crockett did not flinch. She listened, patient, measured, her gaze fixed on him with a steadiness that carried more weight than his rising tone. Viewers at home began to sense something different, something shifting in the dynamic. And then, at the exact moment Jordan expected her to stumble, she leaned into her microphone. Her voice was calm, clear, precise. The silence that followed was louder than Jordan's booming cadence. What happened next had millions replaying the clip in stunned silence. This wasn't just another clash of personalities. It was live television, the kind of broadcast where every pause, every glance, every syllable could echo across the nation before the commercial break. Millions of Americans were tuned in, from living rooms in Ohio to subway screens in New York, waiting to see how the evening would unfold. The stakes weren't confined to the studio. This was political theater at its most raw, and the audience was hungry. Jim Jordan thrived on nights like this. His reputation had been built on a very particular brand of combat: fast, loud, unrelenting. He was the bulldog of Congress, the man who never let go once his teeth sank into a line of questioning. To his supporters, it was strength. To his critics, it was chaos disguised as conviction. Either way, it was a formula that had rarely failed him. He came in hot, kept his opponents off balance, and walked away looking like the last man standing. But Jasmine Crockett was not a typical opponent. Though newer to the national stage, she was already carving out a reputation that set her apart. She didn't need to outshout anyone. She didn't need theatrics. Her weapon was logic, clear, sharp, and surgical. A trained attorney with years of courtroom grit, she had honed the art of dismantling arguments with precision. To those who underestimated her, she was just another rising politician. To those who had actually listened to her, she was something else entirely, a force waiting for the right moment to prove her strength. And this was that moment. For Jordan, this debate was supposed to be routine. Another chance to dominate, to turn sharp rhetoric into viral clips his base would cheer. But for Crockett, the moment carried more weight. She wasn't just defending herself. She was speaking for a broader audience: women, people of color, immigrants, everyday citizens who had grown tired of being talked over, dismissed, or ignored. The room wasn't simply filled with studio lights. It was charged with the unspoken question of whose voice truly represented the nation's values. Every word carried consequences. If Jordan succeeded in steamrolling her, he would reinforce the old playbook: bluster over clarity, dominance over dialogue. But if Crockett managed to hold her ground, even to turn his aggression against him, it could mark a turning point, not just for her career, but for how millions viewed the balance of power in these televised spectacles. The tension thickened as the exchange deepened. Jordan's voice climbed, his cadence growing sharper, his questions designed to trap. Yet, the more he pressed, the more evident it became that Crockett was not rattled. She was waiting, measuring, letting him spend his energy. Like a chess player who sees the board 3 moves ahead, she allowed the audience to watch him build his own momentum, knowing precisely how she would redirect it. The stakes reached beyond the individuals on stage. At its core, this was a battle over credibility, whose voice the public could trust, whose reasoning would hold under the scrutiny of millions of eyes. It was about whether politics would remain dominated by theatrics, or whether clarity and calm logic could finally break through the noise. No one expected her calm logic to dismantle his fiery attack. But in the moments to come, Crockett would prove that respect isn't seized by shouting louder. It's earned by cutting through the noise with undeniable truth. And as she prepared to deliver her first pointed response, the entire nation seemed to lean closer to their screens, waiting for the impact. To understand the magnitude of what was unfolding, you had to understand the man sitting across from Jasmine Crockett. Jim Jordan wasn't just another congressman. He was a brand, a persona, a force of raw political energy who had built his career on confrontation. His style wasn't about quiet persuasion or careful compromise. It was about domination. And for years, that approach had served him well. Jordan's trademark was interruption. He didn't let opponents settle into their arguments. He cut them off mid-sentence, firing the next question before they could finish the first. It wasn't dialogue, it was a barrage. The rhythm was designed to overwhelm, to deny his opponent the chance to find steady footing. In congressional hearings, he became infamous for his ability to turn the spotlight away from himself and onto the disoriented witness sitting across the table. For his allies, this was evidence of toughness. For his critics, it was proof of bad faith tactics. But regardless of where you stood, the method worked. Take almost any high-profile hearing of the past decade, and you would find Jordan's fingerprints on the spectacle. He could turn an investigation into a shouting match, derail a witness with relentless badgering, or create viral clips by sheer force of volume. His fans ate it up. His colleagues, even those who privately bristled at his aggression, couldn't deny his effectiveness. In the theater of modern politics, Jordan was one of the loudest actors on stage, and that volume alone often gave him the appearance of victory. But with that style came controversy. Over the years, questions about his tactics and his choices off the stage began to follow him. Stories surfaced of his role during pivotal political showdowns, of his unwavering loyalty to party over process, of accusations he had dodged rather than addressed head-on. None of it seemed to slow him down. If anything, the criticism hardened his edge. He wore disdain from the press as a badge of honor, and in the eyes of his supporters, it made him all the more defiant, all the more untouchable. At the center of it all was ego. Jordan's belief in his own invincibility wasn't hidden, it radiated from him. He carried himself as though no opponent could outlast him, no argument could withstand his barrage. That ego was his weapon, giving him the confidence to charge into every confrontation like a man already assured of victory. But ego has a dangerous side. The same belief that fuels relentless attacks can also blind a fighter to the moment when the tables are about to turn. And that was the trap Jordan never saw coming. Because while audiences had grown accustomed to seeing him dominate, bulldozing academics in hearings, drowning out rivals on cable news, tonight was different. Tonight, he faced someone who didn't flinch when the storm rolled in. Jasmine Crockett wasn't playing the game by his rules. She wasn't trying to match his volume or mirror his aggression. She let him talk. She let him pace, press, and raise his voice. And the longer he went on, the clearer it became. His greatest strength was also his greatest vulnerability. Audiences expected Jordan to win because that's what they'd been conditioned to see. He had years of proof behind him, clips of adversaries stumbling, hesitating, losing their composure. The narrative was simple. Jordan steamrolled, and the other side folded. But every narrative has its breaking point, and arrogance carries within it the seed of downfall. What no one in that studio realized, what millions of viewers would soon witness, was that Crockett's clarity was the one thing Jordan's bulldozing style could not silence. His ego had driven him to overextend, to underestimate. And in doing so, he set the stage not for another easy victory, but for the most stunning reversal of his career. The audience, still expecting him to control the stage, had no idea that the balance of power was about to shift. And as Jordan leaned harder into his performance, unaware of the cracks forming beneath him, Crockett prepared to show the country that arrogance, no matter how loud, cannot withstand clarity. To understand why Jasmine Crockett's words carried such power that night, you have to step back and trace the road that brought her to that stage. Unlike Jim Jordan, whose reputation was carved in the marble halls of Congress, Crockett's foundation was built in the neighborhoods she grew up in, the courtrooms where justice was too often denied, and the communities where voices like hers had to fight twice as hard to be heard. Her journey wasn't polished. It was forged in struggle, sacrifice, and an unshakable belief that truth could cut through even the loudest noise. Before she ever set foot in Congress, Crockett was a lawyer. Not the kind tucked away in corporate offices, but the kind who walked into courtrooms with ordinary people depending on her. She defended those who couldn't afford high-powered representation, fought for those society often overlooked, and learned early that the system wasn't built to be fair. Time after time, she saw how bias crept into proceedings, not hidden in shadows, but laid bare in the questions asked, the assumptions made, the verdicts delivered. And time after time, she refused to let it pass unchallenged. It was in those moments that Crockett discovered her greatest weapon, clarity. While others relied on theatrics or grandstanding, she wielded logic like a scalpel. Her cross-examinations didn't need shouting. She didn't have to twist the facts. She simply laid them out so cleanly, so undeniably, that even the most skeptical listeners found themselves nodding. It was the kind of precision you can't fake, the kind born from years of battling uphill, knowing the margin for error was razor-thin. But her rise wasn't without bruises. As a black woman stepping into the world of politics, she faced not only the obstacles of partisanship, but also the weight of systemic bias. Doubt followed her into rooms before she ever spoke. Critics dismissed her as too new, too outspoken, too unwilling to play by the old rules. Yet every dismissal only sharpened her resolve. Where others saw barriers, she saw reminders of why she had to keep pushing. Her service in the community kept her grounded. Crockett wasn't someone who viewed public office as a career path. She saw it as an extension of the work she had always done. Whether advocating for civil rights, protecting vulnerable families, or standing up in legislative chambers where her presence alone disrupted the status quo, she carried with her the struggles of those who rarely got a microphone. Each story she heard, each hand she shook, each injustice she witnessed added weight to her words. When she spoke, it wasn't just her voice, it was the echo of thousands behind her. And yet, what made Crockett so effective wasn't only her background or her battles. It was the way she carried herself through them. She had learned early that anger, though justified, could be used against her. So she mastered composure. She had learned that noise could drown out meaning. So she chose precision. She had learned that arrogance, though powerful in the short term, collapsed when met with facts that refused to bend. So she made logic her calling card. Those who underestimated her often mistook her calm for inexperience. They assumed that her quiet confidence meant she wasn't ready for the storm. But those who had seen her in action knew better. They knew that when Crockett leaned forward, when she fixed her eyes and spoke in that deliberate cadence, she was about to dismantle whatever stood in her path. It was resilience wrapped in clarity, sharpened by struggle, and fueled by something larger than herself. That's why, when she entered politics, she quickly became a name people remembered. Not because she sought the spotlight, but because the spotlight couldn't ignore her. Each debate, each speech, each hearing added another layer to her reputation as someone who could stand firm against the loudest voices and leave them grasping for words. And that night, across from Jim Jordan, all of it came together. The years in the courtroom, the battles with systemic bias, the lessons in composure, The countless moments of proving herself against doubt, all of it pointed toward this confrontation. Jordan thought he was facing another opponent to bulldoze. What he didn't realize was that he was facing the sum of every fight Crockett had ever endured, every injustice that had sharpened her, every silence she had learned to break. And on that night, every challenge she had faced prepared her for this exact moment. Jim Jordan launched his attack with the force of a man who had rehearsed the lines 100 times in his head. His voice cut through the studio like a whip, fast and fiery, each question layered with accusation. He leaned forward, jabbing his finger in the air as though the gesture itself could pin Jasmine Crockett into the corner. The cadence was familiar, sharp, relentless, designed to leave no room for thought, no pause for reflection. "Answer the question," he barked, hardly giving her the chance to open her mouth. "Why won't you admit it? Why won't you say what everyone knows?" The audience stiffened. Some shifted in their seats, uneasy but captivated. They had seen this performance before, in hearings, in interviews, in countless televised spectacles. Jordan's strategy was always the same: overwhelm, disorient, dominate. But Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't rush to interject. Instead, she sat still, her posture composed, her hands folded neatly on the desk in front of her. She watched him, unblinking, her expression calm in the face of his fire. It was the kind of composure that wasn't passive. It was active, deliberate, a quiet strength that unsettled precisely because it refused to match the storm. Jordan pressed harder, his volume climbing with each sentence. "This is simple. This is about honesty. Why can't you just give a straight answer?" His words tumbled one after the other, a verbal avalanche meant to bury her beneath the weight of his performance. The cameras caught everything. One lens zoomed in on Jordan's face, reddened with intensity, his jaw clenched as though he were preparing for a physical fight. Another shifted to Crockett, capturing the stark contrast. Her stillness, her steady breathing, the way she tilted her head ever so slightly, as though she were studying him rather than defending herself. And in that contrast, the tension began to build. The audience murmured, small ripples of sound that betrayed their surprise. This wasn't the normal rhythm of a Jordan clash. Usually by now, his opponent would be stumbling, rushing to respond, caught in the chaos of his assault. But Crockett wasn't stumbling. She wasn't even speaking yet, and already it felt as though the energy in the room was shifting. Jordan's words came faster, his interruptions sharper. He cut himself off just to pivot into another point, each one delivered with the urgency of a man, certain he was winning. Yet the harder he pushed, the clearer it became that his aggression was starting to fray at the edges. His voice cracked once, barely, but enough for the microphones to catch it. His hand slammed the desk a little too hard, as though he were trying to force the momentum back into his control. Crockett remained still, and that stillness became louder than his shouting. For the viewers at home, the moment was cinematic. The split-screen image told the whole story. On one side, Jordan flaring with heat and fury. On the other, Crockett composed, her eyes locked on him like a surgeon preparing for a precise incision. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a test of whose strategy would hold. The murmurs grew. A few in the audience even nodded, as if they were beginning to see the trap Jordan was building for himself. Every second he filled with noise was another second Crockett was granted to measure, prepare, and choose her entry point. And when she did, the effect would be all the more devastating. Jordan didn't see it. He mistook her silence for weakness, her patience for hesitation. He thought he was tightening the ropes around her, when in reality, he was digging himself deeper into the pit. And then it happened. Crockett shifted in her chair, leaned slightly forward, and reached toward the microphone. The studio fell into a hush, the murmurs dissolving into a silence, so sharp it seemed to cut through Jordan's booming voice. The cameras swung back to her, closing in on the moment. Then Crockett leaned into her microphone, and the tables turned. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice measured and calm, slicing through the charged silence with the kind of precision that made every word feel deliberate. "Congressman," she began, her tone steady, "you've asked me 3 different questions that contradict each other. If you'd like an answer, You'll need to decide which one you actually mean." The audience gasped, soft at first, then growing louder as murmurs rippled across the room. Jordan froze for a moment, clearly not expecting the pushback to be framed so cleanly. His mouth opened as if to fire back, but Crockett continued, refusing to give him the oxygen of interruption. She paused, just long enough to draw every eye back to her. "This isn't about shouting the loudest," she said, each syllable deliberate. "It's about being clear, and clarity is exactly what the American people deserve." That line hit like a hammer. Heads in the audience began to nod. Jordan shuffled the papers in front of him, his once confident glare replaced with darting eyes, as though searching for a line that would restore control. The cameras captured every detail, his tightening jaw, the way his shoulders hunched slightly inward. Crockett pressed on, her rhythm unhurried, her logic sharp. "You demand honesty, Congressman, yet you twist your questions so that no answer can satisfy you. That may make for good theater, but it doesn't make for good truth." Another pause, this one perfectly timed. The silence after her words felt heavier than Jordan's shouting had just minutes earlier. From the back of the studio, a low murmur turned into scattered applause before being hushed again. The atmosphere had shifted. It wasn't Jordan's performance anymore. It was Crockett's stage. And beyond the room, on screens across the country, the reaction was immediate. Viewers took to social media. Did she just destroy Jordan with pure logic? One tweet read, already racking up thousands of likes. Another post declared, "This is why calm beats chaos every time." Hashtags began trending in real time, the digital applause echoing louder than anything in the studio. Jordan tried to recover, clearing his throat, lifting his chin. But when he leaned toward the microphone, no words came. He hesitated, just long enough for the silence to betray him. His weapon of relentless aggression had been neutralized, dismantled not by equal fury, but by clarity so sharp it left no space for retreat. Crockett's final words in that exchange sealed the moment. "Respect isn't won by volume, Congressman. It's earned by truth." The audience erupted, not in cheers, but in gasps, nods, an unmistakable wave of respect that filled the room. And as Jordan sat back, fumbling with his notes, his eyes shifting nervously under the glare of the cameras, one thing became undeniable. The man who had built a career on overpowering others had been silenced. For the first time, Jim Jordan had no words. The exchange didn't end when the cameras cut to commercial. In many ways, it had only just begun. Within minutes, the clip of Jasmine Crockett dismantling Jim Jordan was circulating online, spreading across social platforms with a velocity few political moments ever achieve. Twitter lit up first, hashtags erupting in real time. Hashtag Crockett clarity, hashtag Jordan silenced, hashtag truth over volume. The short, 20-second snippet of her cutting through his barrage with calm precision became the video people couldn't stop replaying. On TikTok, the clip was paired with dramatic soundtracks, memes, and side-by-side reactions from creators stunned by her poise. One influencer captioned their video, "This is what happens when arrogance meets logic." It amassed hundreds of thousands of likes overnight. Instagram Reels spread the moment further, the comment sections filling with praise. "Finally, someone who doesn't back down. She spoke for all of us, respect." Cable news wasn't far behind. That evening, major outlets replayed the moment with the kind of analysis usually reserved for presidential debates. Anchors slowed down Crockett's words, breaking apart the timing of her pauses, highlighting the look on Jordan's face as his confidence cracked. Some panels marveled at her composure, while others criticized Jordan's approach as reckless. One commentator on MSNBC called it a masterclass in clarity, while a conservative outlet, even while trying to defend Jordan, admitted the moment looked bad for him on camera. The balance had shifted. Crockett had seized not just the narrative, but the respect of an audience far beyond her base. But the real shockwaves came from everyday people. Teachers, students, immigrants, parents, workers, Americans who had grown used to seeing loud voices dominate the airwaves, shared the clip as if it were personal validation. For many, It was the first time in years they felt like someone on that stage wasn't just performing politics, but embodying something deeper, dignity in the face of arrogance. A school teacher in Chicago tweeted, "I played this for my civics class today. We talked about how calm logic can be more powerful than shouting. My students loved it." A young immigrant in California posted, "She said what I wish I could say when people try to talk over me." She gave us all a voice. Each share, each post, each reaction was another ripple in a tide that began to feel unstoppable. Crockett wasn't just winning a debate. She was becoming a symbol of how reason could triumph in an era of noise. Jordan, meanwhile, found himself on the defensive in a way he hadn't experienced before. For years, he had thrived on combative spectacles, often leaving opponents rattled and supporters energized. But this time, the headlines were merciless. Editorials described him as unprepared for clarity, outmaneuvered by patience, and even a man undone by his own tactics. The very weapon he had wielded for so long, his aggression, had backfired under the weight of Crockett's steady logic. In the days that followed, Crockett's stock soared. Invitations to speak poured in. Clips of her previous floor speeches resurfaced, now framed in a new light. Commentators began to ask whether this moment was a turning point not just for her career, but for how Americans judged their leaders. Could clarity finally cut through the culture of chaos? Could calm finally outshine volume? The ripple effects extended into homes where parents showed their children the clip, using it as a lesson about courage, respect, and the importance of standing firm in the face of intimidation. Students shared it in group chats, calling it the real mic drop. Communities who often felt sidelined saw themselves in Crockett's composure, her refusal to be drowned out. This was more than a viral clip. It was a cultural moment, a reminder that the spectacle of politics doesn't always have to end with the loudest voice winning. Sometimes, dignity speaks louder than rage. Sometimes, the silence that follows a single, precise line echoes longer than any rant. The nation had witnessed a shift, subtle but undeniable. And for Jordan, who had once seemed untouchable in his dominance, the silence that closed the exchange wasn't just the end of a debate. It was the beginning of a reckoning. But beyond the headlines, the moral of this moment ran deeper. When the echoes of that night began to fade, what remained was not the memory of shouting or bluster. It was the unmistakable clarity of truth. Jasmine Crockett had reframed the entire clash, showing that politics did not need to be theater, and leadership did not need to be a contest of who could speak the loudest. In her hands, truth became louder than theatrics, and clarity cut deeper than chaos ever could. For years, many had come to believe that arrogance was untouchable, that those who bulldozed their way through debates would always win by sheer volume. But in that studio, Crockett proved something far more powerful. Dignity, calm, and reason can silence even the most practiced aggression. She didn't just hold her ground. She elevated the ground beneath her, reminding everyone watching that respect is not demanded through force. It is earned through logic, composure, and conviction. And so the moral of the moment transcended the debate itself. It became a lesson for classrooms, workplaces, families, and communities. A reminder that when you stand rooted in clarity, even the fiercest storms cannot shake you. When you choose reason over rage, you not only protect yourself, you light a path for others. In that studio, as one commentator put it, it wasn't just a debate, it was proof that respect is earned through logic, not volume. For millions watching, it was more than a viral clip. It was a small but undeniable victory for democracy, for dignity, and for every person who has ever been told to sit down or stay quiet. And it left one enduring truth. Arrogance may shout, but only clarity can truly be heard. Jim Jordan came in expecting another night of dominance, another moment to overwhelm his opponent with rapid-fire interruptions and raw aggression. But instead, he found himself surprised, caught off guard by Jasmine Crockett's unshakable clarity. And as the cameras rolled, it wasn't his voice that carried, but hers. What began as an attempted ambush ended with an audience leaning forward, not to hear Jordan's volume, but to respect Crockett's reason. That's why this moment matters. In an age where shouting often drowns out substance, Crockett proved on live television that truth still has power, calm still has strength, and dignity, even under fire, can silence arrogance in ways bluster never could. This wasn't just a viral clip. It was a reminder of the kind of politics people long to see. Politics rooted not in noise, but in clarity. Not in intimidation, but in conviction. It showed millions that the values of respect, reason, and justice are still alive, and still capable of turning the tide, even against the loudest opposition. And now it's on us. If you believe logic still has a place in politics, share this video. If you believe dignity should never be underestimated, let others see this moment. Together, we can amplify the voices that bring clarity and drown out the ones that thrive on arrogance. So hit subscribe, leave a comment, and join this community of people who know that truth, spoken calmly and firmly, can still win. Because Crockett's words weren't just for that stage. They were for every one of us who has ever wanted proof that respect can rise above noise.